Right. Thank you very much for inviting me to this particular conference. I'm delighted to join you from sunny Geneva in Switzerland on behalf of FIDIC, and I bring you greetings from our president, Bill Howard from United States, who sends his regards. We are always very delighted to join this sort of gathering. The COVID-19 has challenged the world in terms of how flexible we can be. But to be honest, given the opportunity, I would love to join you physically, but you do know that we are with you spiritually, and hopefully we'll be able to join you with the conference. I'm delighted that I've been invited to support over 45 minutes presentation. And I do understand that there's a lot that needs to be covered over these 45 minutes. I also understand that you wanted FIDIC to participate in two modes. One, to talk about the FIDIC relationship with the MDBs, which is the Multilateral Development Bank. And secondly, to also give an indication of FIDIC activities, particularly with the COVID-19, how we are responding to that and what the opportunities are and the challenges. So what I propose to do with your support today is to spend 45 minutes to try and cover those two topics. And I will do my best to try and touch on all the points you've raised. And what I would suggest that if I'm able to finish my presentation on time, if there is opportunity for question and answer, then I'll be delighted to support, as I will not be able to stay throughout the whole conference. So giving it a start, my particular session is going to cover effectively the sort of range of topics you've got. One, to give you an overview about FIDIC. I know quite a lot of people know about FIDIC, but sometimes it's very difficult to try and conceptualize how FIDIC work and the structure. I will talk about, the challenges that the global face in terms of the market drivers, and then spend some time to talk about what we've done as an organization in terms of our dealing with the banks, and then focus towards the end about some of the issues that we had to address, particularly to do with issue of going forward on the COVID-19. I'm not quite sure what is going on, but somehow I can't seem to move my slide to the next slide. Right. So just looking through FIDIC, a lot of people know FIDIC and they do talk about FIDIC as if it's one entity, but actually we are association of association. At the global level, you have FIDIC, which is based in Geneva, which is considered to be a city of peace. This is where the United Nations is based. And there's a lot of what I call multilateral organization based here, which is, WHO, ILO, World Trade Organization. All of them are part of the United Nations. So our headquarters is based in that area. But actually, when you look through the organization, you can tell that we operate through a number of regions. So we have the FIDIC Asia Pacific, we have FIDIC Europe, we have FIDIC Latin America, FIDIC Africa. FIDIC Middle East is about to be formed, but it's not yet confirmed, but the board have it in principle. Likewise, the FIDIC North America is also something that we are looking to establish, which should give us an opportunity for us to, share and bring our members together in that particular continent. Within each of the regions that I talked about, you will notice that we have a number of associations. So we have a cluster of association for Asia Pacific, for Europe, and from Latin America, and also across the region. So altogether, we have roughly about 102 countries which have an association, and those associations, really, they are representing companies in their own country. So typical companies that, members represent with people like Jacobs, Arcadis, and Rambo's, WSP, Power China, McDonald's, and the list goes on. But as much as we are representing companies, but we also get involved in what I call, sort of aid activities. So we are heavily involved with Reda and Oxfam. As an organization, the way we operate is very simple. We have our board, which is made up of people that you can see from the screen. They come from different parts. Bill Howard is from the United States. Louis Lobin is from China. You've got Tony Barry, who's from Australia. Gavin English, typical English, is from United Kingdom. You got Mark, which is from Netherlands, and you've got Sawano from Indonesia, You've got Luis, who is actually from Spain, and Catherine is just joining us from Canada, and James Mwangi from Kenya. So those group of people are the board members, and they are in the office for 4 years. But as much as they are board members, they have responsibility, and you can see each board member assigned each of the region to be responsible for. And we also have a number of cluster of committees which we work with to actually deliver what we have to do. So we have diversity and inclusive group. We have what we call business practice committee, capacity building, and we have contract committees which actually produce all our contract. And you probably hear more about the contract later on. You have integrity management group, membership committee, risk and liability, digital transformation is a new group we are putting together, and also sustainability and development group. The new kid on the block is what we've called international financial institution, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But in addition to that, we have all our region in our regional council. We have future leader grouping, and all together they advise the board on activities. Now, you may probably say, exactly what are the challenges that any industry face. Right now, we have issues to do with political issue. We have issues to do with what is happening in the oil and gas sector. There are issues to do with which business model is ideal for the future. On top of that, our industry is consolidating, is expanding. We have the challenge of merger and acquisition, companies that are changing, and they're changing their size. We have sustainability, which is a big issue, and then more and more people are living in the city. I'm not quite sure after this COVID-19, maybe less and less people will be living in the city. But against that background, there are political issues, the influence of China around the world, the issue about stability in different parts of the world, which is demonstration going on. Of course, you have the Donald Trump factor. South Africa is a big country and it has a major impact. And of course, when you talk about it, you use the issue about COVID-19. Within that is the role of the EU and their powerful position. So all of these are the factors that effectively is impacting how our industry is operating. And if I go through with all of that factor, nevertheless, you may ask the question, what is the headline for us? I think it is fair to say FIDIC has just launched a new strategic plan. We continue to build our credentialing, which is about training and development. I'll talk about the webinars that we put together as part of the COVID response. We'll also talk about, we've relaunched our committee to make sure they are representative across all our region. We are now looking at the state of the world, and we are putting a new set of documents together to help us in advocacy. We are constantly looking at what is happening in the COVID, and I will talk about that later on. We've just completed our annual General Assembly, and we are also looking at delivering our conference, which we've done online. The list of things that we've done are very much along that area. One area important, which would be of interest, is the implementation of new structure as an organization, which we are constantly working on to make sure we are reflecting. And you saw that at the beginning of my conversation. But looking through, we have new website, new corporate plan, and we are dealing with regular communication in terms of the CEO, and we get more information now in terms of direction of travel. A lot of activities for the years are actually contained in our annual report, which can be downloaded. And the strategic plan basically, set out the roadmap for the next 4 years. I mean, it's fair to say when you stop for a minute and you say, what are the challenges and how is FIDIC operating? Our key cornerstone is to continue to produce guidance document for the industry. And some of this, we'll talk about it later on. We are now looking at our state of the world, where we look at transport, energy, infrastructure, what is happening in different sectors. We're looking at how do we communicate in terms of what is happening now with the COVID, and I will talk a little bit more about that later on. So the issue about COVID and how we're tackling that is critical for us. You also have the impact of social media. All these are very critical in terms of how we operate in the new world. I want to spend some time now to talk about the FIDIC contract and coverage, because I think this leads us into the point as to how is that connected with the MDB. I mean, the FIDIC contract is well known. That is general condition, which is fair, risk balance, worldwide accepted. All the banks, actually, most of all banks now have accepted it, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Specific conditions are possible for MDBs because most of the multilateral development banks, they're able to look at general condition and to adopt, particular condition which is relevant to them. Of course, Islamic Development Bank is among the list of banks we have been talking to, and I'll talk about later on. But developing a funded project by a multilateral development bank, they use it very well, is seen to enable a significant reduction in corruption because it's balanced and well understood. It is an international standard, over 50 years old. Everybody understands what FIDIC does and FIDIC contract does. It's used by private and public sector. A lot of trainings are available with different options, and is backed up by best business practice in terms of risk, integrity, sustainability, and capacity building. And there is the point about the adjudication service where there is a dispute on how do we actually help to resolve that particular dispute through what happened in terms of activity. I think it's also fair to say when you look through the suite of FIDIC contract, you have the new professional service contract, which is now evolving. You have the works contract from the yellow book to the green book to the gold, emerald book, and to silver book. Then you have general practice and best business practice document, which is actually available. And then you have the harmonized document, which is also equally available. And I'll talk a little bit about that. Now, if you look at the procurement, landscape, you can see exactly where FIDIC fit into it. At point level, FIDIC tend to influence at regional, national, and government level. And that's our level of involvement and influencing, because we leave the local lobbying into the local association. In terms of the FIDIC contract, we help to harmonize in terms of policy, internal procurement, external procurement, supply chain, and operation. Obviously, if you look at each of the sort of landscape in the procurement side, you can see there's quite a lot of activities going on. The contract document we produce enable consultant and contractor's role to be clearly defined. The role of the subcontractor is clearly defined. And what you also find that the document that FIDIC produce cover a number of range area, from what I see as definition and planning to construction. And we also get involved in the conception. And one area we're looking at now increasingly is how we can get involved in operational maintenance and decommissioning of assets. We do not have contracts in that particular area for now, but we are gradually working into that. And the board have just approved production of 3 new contracts, which may take 2 years to 3 years to develop. One is a collaborative contract, 2 is to do with PPP, and the third one is to do with EPCM contract. All these contracts are now being worked on, and gradually you see them coming up. If we have that together, it should give us a complete set of documents. But when you look at the FIDIC contract, it said, how are we engaging the industry? Our approach has always been very simple. We need to have products that actually ensure that you have continuity of relationship with all stakeholders. So from the point of holding conferences, we hold 5 conferences around the world on the FIDIC contract, in Europe, in Africa, in Middle East, in Asia Pacific, and Latin America. We continue to do that. 2 years ago, we invented the FIDIC Award, which is now becoming very popular. And then we do the advocacy, which is where we work with the like of the banks and get the banks to adopt and different government entity to adopt the contract. We produce the newsletter, which is always very useful. There's always the guidance note that we produce. And of course, our members have an opportunity to access the particular contract document. You may ask the question, who uses the FIDIC contract? It's very simple. You can see their logo from the presentation here. You got the private sector from the like of IKEA to Barclays Bank, to Siemens, to Cisco, to EDF, Thomas Reuters, and a lot of legal firms. From government entity, you have the like of JICA, Fusion for Energy, and the list goes on. When you then look at the Multilateral Development Bank, virtually all of them, from European Development Bank to African Development Bank, to Asian Development Bank, Inter-American Development Bank, World Bank, and also most of the United Nations operating company, they've all adopted FIDIC contract, which in a way, it must be a good recognition of how influential the FIDIC document is worldwide. Now, specifically to do with the Multilateral Development Bank, you would have had through our press release over the last 6 months that we've actually spent quite a lot of time in engaging banks. And this is to do with all the Multilateral Development Bank. It is very important that the Multilateral Development Bank actually endorse our FIDIC document. You will know, for those who are familiar with FIDIC contract, that the old pink book was a 1999 version of the red book, which World Bank actually brought together and brought all of that Multilateral Development Bank together with a view that they can adopt it. And that pink book was adopted up until when the 2017 document was published. But the pink book is just a small part of the suite of contract that FIDIC produced, which is really a reflection of the red book. But what we've now done is sign a new agreement with 7 multilateral development banks, 7 of them, starting from the World Bank, Islamic Development Bank, which is the latest one, and I'm glad that Islamic Development Bank is actually actively involved with this particular conference, and thank you to them for their support in making sure that the Development Bank actually adopted. We've got European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, EBRD, fully adopted it. Inter-American Development Bank, the same John, African Development Bank, Asian Infrastructure Development Bank, Caribbean Development Bank. We are still going through the list. We believe that within next 12 months, we should close out the only 2 development banks, which is Asian Development Bank and possibly European Investment Bank. It is our view that the bank's adoption is a clear recognition of the importance of the FIDIC document. The only issue that I really want to do to just qualify at this point is effectively that the bank are looking at not just adopting the red book, they've now adopted the whole suite of the Rainbow Suite 2017. So that is actually quite good in terms of the breadth of the adoption, which is really good for our industry. Now, for every bank that sign up to FIDIC contract, one of the things that we've been doing to help our industry and also to strengthen our relationship with the bank is very much to produce a guidance note, which we call the MDB Investment Program. So we look at each bank and we look at their policy and we look at their investment portfolio, we look at their particular sector where they're investing in, and we produce specific report. First of all, the first report that we produce is an overall guide for member association and their member firm on what FIDIC is doing with MDB. And that's the main document that you have on this right-hand side. And that document really spells out what agreement we've got with the bank, how the bank is using the contract document, and how member firm can benefit from the arrangement that the bank has with FIDIC. So that's the first document, and that is well positioned. That document is available on our website. It doesn't cost you anything. You can download it. Then every time we sign an agreement with each MDB, we also look at the MDB portfolio. We look at how much money they're spending, in what sector are they spending, what is their procurement process, and what is the timeline for investment. And as you can see from the slide here, it shows with the Islamic Development Bank is looking roughly about 7 billion of investment in 2018. Because we've just signed the agreement with them, we don't really have full details of the portfolio, but I'm pleased that a lot of speakers will be from the Islamic Development Bank. They'll be able to share their investment portfolio. But we do believe close to 7 billion was invested in 2018. So if you look across the spread, the Inter-American Development Bank, 11.3 billion, World Bank, 7.1 billion, EBRD, 11.97 billion, AFDB, which is African Development Bank, 400 million, and then Caribbean Development Bank, 283, then Asian Infrastructure Development Bank, about 12.4 billion. So that gives you a picture of the spread. We spent some time with the bank to understand details of their project pipeline and investment figure, details of their procurement practices and document, and useful link to engage with them and to project. So this information is available on our website, and all members of FIDIC and the public can actually download the information and use it as a reference point. And we commit to continue to update this particular document every so often. And the agreement we sign with the bank, just for clarification, is not for 1 year, it's not for 2 years, for 5 years. One of the things we committed with the MDB is that in time, we cannot do it in one night. In time, we will have all the documents, which are the Rainbow Suite for 2017, in 5 different languages. Of course, the original document is in English. We are now planning to have it in Arabic. We're about to sign an agreement for translation. We are similarly about to sign an agreement into French. This is quite important, particularly in the Francophone African section, and where investment is being done. For example, in the case of Islamic Development Bank, they will be quite keen to have it in French and English because of the investment portfolio. The same thing with African Development Bank. So we're about to commission signing translation into Arabic and French. Spanish, we've already completed that. In fact, we did that with the Inter-American Development Bank, where we took all the rainbows we translated into Spanish. That's now available. Portuguese, we are nearly there with the Portuguese. This is very important, particularly those in countries where they speak Portuguese. Chinese, we do believe that we will have all our complete suite translated into Chinese by the first quarter in 2021. This is very important because you now hear about the One Belt, One Road. We've also signed an agreement with Chinka, which is Chinese, International Contractor Association, who are keen to actually adopt FIDIC contract in all their projects all over the world. So it's important that we need to be sure that issue about corruption, integrity, sustainability, and quality is really engaged by the Chinese when they're working all over the world. So from that point of view, FIDIC is committed to translating all its contracts into various languages. This includes these 5 core languages, and we're working on that. Having said that, I think it's worth qualifying that the previous document that we had, which is the 1999 version, I think it's fair to say, my record confirmed that we've got it in 27 different languages. By the way, for the 2017, it's already been translated into Serbia, it's translated into Vietnam, it's translated into Russia. So we are talking to other countries where we need to have it translated, but it's absolutely important in our engagement with the bank that we have the FIDIC document translated into these 5 international languages. Now, the other point that I need to mention is one of the partnering and the benefit of FIDIC membership is that in countries where the language is not any of these 5 languages, if any particular country wish to approach us because they are a member of FIDIC and they want to have the FIDIC contract translated into their language, for example, in Indonesia, which is a part of the operating country for Islamic Bank, I believe they are working on that to make that, to translate the FIDIC contract document into Indonesia language. And this will be applicable in Malaysia as well as in Singapore if you want to use that. Now, having said that, one of the key things that the board has actually agreed is that if we are signing an agreement with the Multilateral Development Bank, then we need to strengthen our relationship with them. And the best way to do that really is very much, to set up what we call International Financial Institution, a committee. That committee is now being established and it's got a clear focus and it's got a clear mandate and strategic priority. We've discussed this with the Multilateral Development Bank. They welcome it because it gives us a better opportunity to connect better to them. And what are we doing with them? We want to build a strong relationship between the IFIs, which is International Financial Institution, and FIDIC, through regular meetings and representation at IFI events. We want to promote the use of FIDIC contract and agreement, other document and associated training to guide and improve their business practice and procurement reform. We want to promote FIDIC's principle of quality, integrity, and sustainability to mitigate and to adapt the consequence of climate change, mass urbanization, energy transition, and the infrastructure need of emerging countries. This is quite important. Also, we want to plan and coordinate and execute IFI conferences in operation with Secretariat. So this particular conference that is being come up, when I was invited, I was delighted that the FCIC is actually taking that initiative, and I'm really pleased that we are able to support you, and we'll be doing this in different regions where the IFIs are operating. We've been invited by AIB. We are talking to European Investment Bank. We've had a conversation in Italy with EBRD. So where the Multilateral Development Bank are operating and presenting, we've made it a point that we need to support them. What else are we doing? We've formed the particular group, and the list of those members of the group are very much shown on the list. The president of Schledia, which is Manish Kothare, is the chairman. It is a new committee, and if you have a look on the list of those who are participants there, you will see clearly that it is a multinational, very diverse people to make sure that all the MDB coverage are fully covered. So we have people from Africa, people from Asia, from Middle East, and from Latin America to make sure that we have true representation across the membership. Now, the issue for us, if I go back onto that slide, is that this team has just been set up. They will have the mandate for all the stuff that I mentioned earlier on. And it's important that they report to the board, that we have a structured program with the MDB, and we'll be talking to the Islamic Development Bank, EBRD, African Development Bank, looking at their specific program. Either they are running their own conferences, in which case they invite us, or we are running our conferences, in which case we're quite happy to invite them, so that there is a strong dialogue to have 360-degree loop on feedback to make sure we know what is working and we also know what is not working. Now, at this point, I just want to move on to the next part of the question, which you asked me, which is really to talk about the COVID-19. The world has changed. Definitely, the world has changed. Anybody that see what is going on statistically tells me that we have over 8 billion people around the world that's been affected. If you look at where this thing has been really bad, it's very much a different part of the world. But let's look at the, the COVID issue. Over 2 million years of evolution, and we still see a lot of infection coming through, but we never know about this particular one, this COVID-19, unusual after 2 million years. But on average, we know that the carrier of this can infect 2 to 4 people within a very short period. The infection rate is very high, and when you look at the size of this particular virus, you cannot see. It's so tiny that you can have 100 million copies of the tiny on top of a tip of needle. So it's very, very difficult to see. And the SARS-CoV-2 remain dangerous for the society at large. I'm really pleased now that you have 4 vaccination coming through. We don't know how quickly the world is going to deal with it, but this is a very, very big challenge for all of us. When you look through the impact of the COVID, you see clearly that America has been badly affected by this slide. You can see from the slide you can see, they are heavily affected, followed by Southeast Asia, and then followed by Europe, and then gradually you start to look at the impact on Eastern Mediterranean, and then you look at the impact on Africa and the Western Pacific. And you can see that in Western Pacific and Africa, and also Mediterranean area, the impact is less. The reason for that is very simple. It is a warm temperature area, and therefore the COVID doesn't actually sustain itself in that environment. But somehow you can see the impact on North America, which is quite big, and also Southeast Asia, which is also equally big. The statistics are very much there. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But what I really want to talk about, which is, it was only in March this year that this thing really hit the wall. In fact, on the 17th of January, 2020, I was actually in Beijing, not knowing that 23rd of January, you have a lockdown. But when you look through the market performance since we have the COVID, and you look back in the last 3 years, you can see the investment in consultancy and engineering was effectively 147 billion. And that is looking through in 2018, that rose to 160 in 2019, and 2020, there's a huge drop of nearly 18%, coming to 132. And effectively, this is showing a significant reduction in our sector, down a lot by 18%. When you look through a different region, you can see the difference between 2019 and 2020. You look through North America, a significant reduction by 18%. You look through Europe, 22%. You look through Africa, there's 12%. And then in Latin America, 20%, and Middle East, 19%, and Africa, 16%. So there's a net revenue drop of 228 billion, which tells me the COVID-19 has definitely impacted our industry. Whether we like it or not, it has impacted our industry. And you look through different sector, you start to ask yourself, what is the impact across the sector? Quite clearly, a significant reduction across the sector. And a lot of companies now are looking through their business and asking themselves the question, how bad has it been and what is it going to be in 2021, and how best should they position themselves? So company may survive 2020, but what do we expect in 2020 and 2025? Can we see a positive growth, or are we going to see a reduction? Obviously, when I put this slide together some time ago, I was hoping that vaccination will come in, and my gut feeling is perhaps until the vaccination come into operation in 2021, it's very difficult to actually predict what the impact is. But if you stop for a second and you actually look at the figure that I presented you in terms of the global economy and you look at what is happening in 2019, 2020, and 2021, you can see quite clearly the world has changed. There will be a new norm, an increasingly likely protracted recession. And I do foresee recession will be potentially for a year or two, if not three, depending on where you are in the world. What is actually, obvious that in the last 12 months, we can see a significant reduction in the shape of capital investment. I think the only area in 2020 that actually see a positive growth is actually China. Everything else is red. It is red. So my take on it is, if you Google, like my daughter always say, that if you're in difficulties of knowing the answer for the future, always Google. If you Google the big subject right now at the moment, in the last 12 months, you see the big area of concern is really very much on the issue of recession. So people are talking about 2020 Q4, which is very rare. Are we going to see more unemployment? Now, what you see in the red line here is saying, if we don't, the unemployment rate will go down. But if you have a second wave of COVID, which is what we are having, the unemployment rate will go up before it goes down. So I suspect the rest of the world, just like Geneva or wherever you are in the world, going through second wave. And the impact on this is actually predicted to be more severe on what I call long-term unemployment, particularly with the small to medium-sized company. The view is that the blue line is the unemployment rate that was seen in the version 1 of the COVID, and the red line is where you're going to see more impact on public debt, because the public have to borrow more money to be able to build the industry out. And the other point that is saying is the impact on small to medium-sized farm company. Now, if you go to the West, you see a big consulting firm where there are 30,000, 40,000, or 50,000. But if you go to emerging market, of which most of the the developing countries are, you see small to medium-sized consultancy firm, and I think they're going to be impacted because of the change to the structure of the industry. And you can see the difference in terms of the impact on employment, particularly those companies who are going to be in the very, very small range side of it. You look forward and you start to ask the regions with the highest share of job potentially at risk. You quite clearly, our sector in construction industry is going to be actually affected, but it's not the worst. Because if you're in retail and if you're in hospitality business, the impact is more severe. Because in construction sector, you can still work. And the point that I was raising about Google is actually the big subject at the moment that carry a lot of research on the Google is very much about what is happening in the COVID and what is the impact it's going to have. The EU have taken a very, very broad view of investing $280 million budget for 120 new life program projects. And the intention is to fund and trigger investment of 590 million, which is targeted towards what they see the Green Deal objective. And I think this is going to be a big issue. So you may ask, how has FIDIC responded in the last 12 months to the issue? Well, it's quite obvious. For those who's been following FIDIC, I remember we have our annual conference, we have all the users conference, all of those programs had to be aborted. We completely stopped it. And we put together within a period of 10 weeks, 18 webinars was run in 10 weeks. We had 15,000 individuals who registered to participate. We had 9,000 that actually participated during the particular webinar. We had over 150 countries that participated, nearly 80 speakers from all over the world. And since then, all the particular conversation that we cover during that 10 weeks is now uploaded on our YouTube, and people are available to actually watch them on the YouTube. The interesting bit is that on the YouTube, we've got over 10,000 people who has visited the 18 webinar and listened to that. Because when you look at the subject that we covered during the webinar, we were looking at what is the impact of the COVID-19 on member association, how are they responding, what is the challenges for them, and what advocacy program are they pursuing. We also look at the impact on contract, the supply, the labor, the activities on site, and dealing with force majeure. This was quite a big issue for us. We look at impact on joint venture arrangement. What does it mean between contractor and contractor, between contractor and consultant? We look at impact on consultancy agreement and the role of engineer within the project. We're looking at insurance, what security and liability, business interruptions in place. We look at alternative dispute resolution, the role of dispute avoidance during this period. We looked at how lockdown has enabled more digital and remote working. Is it good? Is it bad? what lesson can we learn, and how do we take it forward? We discuss issue about managing employment relationship, employees, health and safety requirement on site. We're looking at how do you defend your balance sheet, securing your business financial position, and raising capital during the difficult time, including liquidity during the when you have delayed payment. We discuss a lot about crisis response, plan, and industry perspective. We're looking at issue about communicating, and this is communicating internally and externally with your staff, with your stakeholder, with your client. We look at how do you kickstart the economy when the phase one was over, lesson learned from government, and what are the government doing all over the world. We discuss the role of international financial institutions and the exit, from COVID-19, because more and more of them are moving from capital project into operational project to look at health and safety, to look at well-being of society, and how the industry and the country can get back on. We looked at issue about client and investors perspective. We also talk about issue about coming out of COVID and lesson learned during the COVID phase one, and how can the infrastructure industry improve its resilience to dealing with future pandemic. And we concluded on a pandemic that has changed the world, and we actually look at what lesson have been learned in that process and that journey. Now, that was a very, very challenging experience for us, but looking through the list of those who participated, we had bank, we had consultant, we had multilateral development bank, we have all of them participating in the particular project. We even have insurance company, we have McKinsey, we have system technology provider, and we have different group of people within our industry to make sure at least we have a true representation. Now, over the same period, we were also delighted, not only do we deliver that 10-week intensive program, we were able to run our Future Leader program, which is our conference. We did our president meeting this year online. We did our General Assembly online. We did our regional group meeting online. We looked at our executive committee meeting. We delivered that online. Director and secretaries meeting. We actually had 6 board meetings during the same period online. It just confirmed that notwithstanding the challenges of the COVID, that our industry is resilient, and if we can be agile and be quick, we can actually address a lot of the issues without impacting the production of the industry. But the key question for us is, what lesson have we learned in the process? Now, the big lesson is that there is a new normal. We need to understand that the economic impact of COVID is visible and will impact our industry between 1 to 2 trillion. That staff and their well-being is key to survival of consultancy and sector, that there will be implication for contract, project, get delayed and postponed. That communication is critical, investment in profile of financial and government will change as a result of this COVID-19. Infrastructure in the short time, even in the medium and long term, we need to account for the risk of pandemic or adjust to condition. Collaboration and working together as industry is more important than ever, and no company, big or small, is immune for COVID-19. So the lesson learned there is actually quite visible. COVID contract guide, what we did, and I talked about why you use FIDIC contract before, what we did during the same period, not only did we stage 18 webinar, we produced a number of guide for the industry. We produced one for general consultancy and industry, which is a guide for global consulting engineering that look at your business and business entities to make sure business is viable. So that document is available and can be downloaded from FIDIC website. We looked at issue about working on site and how you should protect your staff, and look at the health and safety, and all of that was covered as our risk issue. We produced that document. We take a deep dive into looking through contract and take a typical contract and analyze it and ask, create a number of scenarios of what issues that can arise as a result of COVID and how best you can deal with them, and we produce another guide. So these guides are available on our website and anybody can download them. But actually you could ask the question, what does that mean in terms of challenges and opportunity? What it tells me is that we are now moving into 4th industrial revolution. Climate parity will come as a big issue. Global and digital integration, we're seeing more and more people are working from home. Transport need will need to be redefined. Where is the role of technology? Where is the role of 5G, and how does telecommunication work? And more people are working in the area where they can work from home. Health and education is going to be critical. Social distancing will be something that needs to be here. So we've actually maintained this so-called 2 centimeter or 2 meter apart. This is very critical. With that in mind, we do believe that the world is not going to be the same, that there is going to be a new world order, and that the world is not blue anymore or green, that we need to challenge ourselves. So we say that there will be a new world that we get smaller or bigger. People either look inward or look outside. That building requirement we need to change and to adapt to the issue of COVID-19 and future of pandemic need to look at it. We need to look at the personal form of transport, such as car, becoming more important, and how would we need in public transport. We're looking at transportation and see the impact on that. We look at issue about, is there more remote working to be done? How many more people needs to work from home? I am actually delivering this message from home, and I've got facility to speak anywhere in the world. We will need to look more digital in the way we are operating in the future. And also we'll be asking ourselves, do we need to burn more carbon? Last year, I did 250,000 air miles. This year, I've done absolutely nothing, and yet I'm still functioning. Fundamental question. And the other point that comes across, which you need to be mindful of, what is likely to be social and economic order? So we believe there's going to be social contract, which will change in terms of staff, employee, and relationship. The supply chain and flow of trade will change. Globalization, geopolitical impact is going to be critical. Building, what is the new building requirement in future? What is the new transport requirement in the future? How going green is going to be critical to what we do from investment. Most of the banks are looking at sustainability development goal being built into infrastructure investment. And some of them we talk about SDG. We're looking at health and safety and well-being, and the impact of digital will become more visible in our industry. So in summary, my view on it is that we're going to go through some recession. There will be physical stress on each country, on the economy and budget. There is a period of uncertainty through the virus dynamics until we can actually get a vaccination. There will be a global dimension which will impact different boundary, different geography, and different region. There will be a regional variation on how we resolve the issue. And the more important, there will be national policy and differences in national policy. My take on it is a big driver, as I see it, is that we are facing a number of icebergs. And some of them are big, some of them are small. I talked about new social contract behavior. How many people want to work in the office? How many people want to work fair balance on? Where is the digitization and business model is going to come? Are we going to have the same business model or a change in our business model? The democracy and geopolitics and investment, what is that coming through? What is happening in the Middle East? What is happening in Africa? What is happening in Asia? If Donald Trump is out, will it be positive or negative for the rest of the world? About thinking America first, or are we thinking about global entity? Then the issue about health and safety and vaccination is going to be critical. And more important, climate and SDG will become a relevant issue. My take on it is that growth during the next 2 years will be stagnated with just a minor growth in one particular area. Profitability in our sector will be low, if possible, single figure, and some may go through negative. There will be pressure on employment. I think there will be a lot of people who doesn't know whether their pipeline is good, whether they can keep their staff. This is a challenge for us. There will be issue about liquidity, which is because of delayed payment and challenges and cash flow management that will be happening. I always say cash is king. It's very important to maintain that. We've seen evidence of merger and acquisition. I suspect there would not be a lot of that coming through. And I actually think most companies will have to go through the issue of finance, and looking at going concern will be a challenge to most companies to override. So my take on it is the building sector will have a moderate growth. Energy that will be focused on renewable with growth and decarbonization. Water increasing demand will be modest. I think architectural landscape and urbanization, there will be a blended city. New city will start to look at how much people do I want to work in the city? How do I distribute the urbanization? And what technology do I need to move so that if we have a pandemic in future, we are not being pressurized? Transport, there will be a change in the need of transportation, and what I call environmental and health issue, significant growth that will come out of that, driven by the sustainability development goal that's coming through, which most MDB are looking at. Then there is the soft skill of advice to work, which the banks are craving for, because most banks now are trying to solve countries' problem by supporting on what I call the OPEX, which is things that keep life going rather than capital project. When I spoke to most of the multilateral development bank, their comment to me is that, Nelson, we really need to get to a point where we need to support the society, and the days of big project is long gone during this COVID. But when the COVID crisis is over, we can look at a new chapter. And on that note, I'm going to say thank you very much for inviting me to deliver this 45-minute keynote. I hope I've addressed the issue about the role of FIDIC and the MDB, the role of FIDIC, MDB, and what we're doing with the guidance note, our proposal in terms of how we've addressed the issue of COVID, and I've explained that, and I've provided you with a lot of information on what is available on our website. And I just want to close up by saying, yes, we haven't had a FIDIC actual conference this year. We had a virtual one, and we are hoping that 2020 will become 2021, and we can have our conference next year at Fairmont Grand Hotel in Geneva. On that note, I bring you once again President, Bill Howard greeting, and I also expressed interest from Anthony Barry, our president-elect, and the Vice President Liu from China. So thank you very much for inviting me. I hope I've covered all the topics, and that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nelson. For question and answers, I see some questions from the audience. Okay. Thanks for this great presentation, really.
Thank you very much. And you can put the question to me and I'll do the best to answer the question.
Okay. One question is about what can FIDIC do or plan to help consultants from countries who are facing risk of elimination? The FIDIC seminars and efforts shows it's more concerned about the consultants industry in the more resourceful origins instead of the less resilient economic environment who are going to be marginalized.
Thank you. That's a very good question. The question is always about what FIDIC can do. I would like to throw the question back to say FIDIC can only do so much in the sense that our focus is very much on a global agenda. We cannot go to individual country and lobby the government as to what they should spend, what they shouldn't spend. However, what we could do is to influence at two levels. One, to influence them when they decide they're going to invest, that we actually encourage them on how best to invest and how they can actually use local consultants to make sure those local consultants create employment, and to also to ensure that local consultants are able to train their people so that when there is a growth, there is resources in the future. This is very, very, very critical. We are always in favor of local capacity building. The other point where we could do to support the developing country is through our engagement with the Multilateral Development Bank. As I did said earlier on, most development banks are now shifting their emphasis on managing the crisis. And so development bank, we need to talk to them on a regular basis to make sure that when they are pumping money into countries, which is emerging country, and those countries need investment on infrastructure, that they pursue the procurement of that investment in a proper manner, in such a way that they use the right procurement process and it's transparent, and to make sure that it's an audit trail in the way they deliver those particular investments. Because the biggest criticism we've always had in emerging country is about transparency of delivering and corruption. And this is why we've expanded our role with the bank beyond just pure contract to look into other particles of FIDIC, which is the issue about the quality of design, the issue about sustainability of the environment, and more importantly, transparency and integrity of the procurement process. So in answer to your question, at two levels: the local association, if they invite us, such as this particular issue, where we can talk to the Islamic region as a collective view, and we think through that we can influence and encourage the like of Islamic Development Bank to make sure that when they procure or invest in any particular country within the Islamic-speaking country, that we can support them in that way. So I hope that would be a good starting point. But we are very open to ideas from each of our member firms or each of our member association on what they think we can help. If they come to us with ideas, then we are quite happy to put the FIDIC brand and support them locally. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much. And one more question about any FIDIC guidelines for digital technology application to consulting firms under COVID-19?
Thank you very much. That's also equally a very good question. I think you picked that question very well, because when I was delivering my message, I did say that the new normal is we have to work flexible. And the key word of work from home, WFH, is now becoming normal. And to do that means that we have to invest in digital technology. In fact, if you look through some of the slides that I presented earlier on, there is one committee which we've just created called Digital Transformation Committee. That Digital Transformation Committee is really something that we now recognize is absolutely important for our industry to be sustainable. We hope to populate or to staff that particular committee with people around the world to help us to look at, what technology are in play now and what technology do we see coming up in the near future, and to start to prepare our industry for that. You've heard issue about digital twins, you've had issue about BIM, but actually I think the impact of 5G is going to be significant for all of us. And even though the vaccination is going to come through, to actually vaccinate, nearly 7 billion people will take 2 to 3 years to do that. So more and more people will still want to work from home, and it's important that investment is put into technology to enable people to work as flexible as possible. We are not there yet, but we are doing everything possible. We're just about to publish a document on BIM, on the application of BIM, and we will be looking at producing a series of reports on the impact of technology on our sector. And I would just encourage all participants in this conference to look out and to support when we make inquiry to understand what the industry needs and how best we support the industry in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thanks again. I think we can only have one more question because of the limited time. Since COVID-19 is a continuous event, would one consider it a force majeure event for the new projects? Would you suggest to postpone the commencement of new projects when possible? Or what kind of risk mitigation activities would you would propose?
Again, a very, very good question. Yes, I think force majeure is a big subject that I wanted to look at. And I always want to qualify the subject of force majeure that is not only impacting the supply chain, it also impacts the client, the owner of the asset. So we are all in these difficulties. Do I foresee another pandemic in the near future? I think the answer to that is anything is possible. And I talked about 2 million years that we've gone on this earth, and suddenly we've just discovered COVID-19. We don't have any measure for that. I don't know what else is going to break out in the marketplace. I would like to have anyone. I think, among contingency plan that any company should do is to plan that there may be another pandemic. And if it does happen, then we have to think about what does it mean on contract. So let me answer the issue about contract in 3 modes. First of all, contract is between 2 people. And the contract, yes, set the rules and responsibility of both sides of the party. But actually, I think key part of the contract is about communication and understanding and collaboration. So my view on it is anybody going into a new contract should be sure that there is enough clauses in that contract that should now embrace the lesson learned during this COVID-19, build that into that. I think it would be naive of anybody going into contract, not actually doing that. I think if you look through the FIDIC contract right now as it is, there is scope in there to deal with force majeure, and they call it exceptional circumstances. And there's a test of what you need to go through. And if you pass those tests and they confirm it is force majeure. But the answer to the question is effectively anybody going into contract now, I would not discourage them from going into contract. I would say, please go into contract, have your mind fairly open, be collaborative in your approach. And I think one of the 10 lessons that I pick up from the webinar is about communication is very critical. Communication before you sign the contract, a clear understanding of using the right contract. And when you have difficulties during the contract, be sure that you're engaging in a collaborative manner with your client, with your supply chain, to make sure all the problems that we can foresee, that we've experienced during this pandemic can be mitigated or iron out in a collaborative manner. Going to lawyer is not going to solve the problem. because everybody's going to try and make money out of it. But what matters most is to find a collaborative approach to resolve it. And the FIDIC contract that we have now are actually there and fit for purpose and can support any new contract. But I actually just said, have it at the back of your mind. Social distancing, the health and safety, the requirement that the government imposed, we built it into the contract to make sure the contract become more user-friendly. Thank you very much.